this gathering?
Yeah.
Education and the whole question of what's happening in the Foundry building. The fact that people are interested in using it for and artwork has been in mathematics and math literacy for many years. It's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. For children, yeah.
And there's a significant group that wants to use a significant portion of the Foundry building for a STEAM program. Yeah.
Which we did not talk about today.
Right.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to
We are.
Yeah. So Maesha still has a talking piece.
My name is Lori Job. I live on the corner of Essex and Bishop Allen in Area 4, right off Central Square. We've moved in 1988, so we've been here for a while. And I'm very concerned about Central Square. I want to see change, I want to see development, but I want to see it in a well-planned way. And I don't mind seeing the neighborhood change, in my opinion, if it's for the better. but I'd like to keep some of what it is now, too. And I guess I'm here to hopefully find a balance between the two opposing sides. And I think we can find a balance and compromise and do it in a smart way, I hope.
And what sustains you?
That's going to take too long. The reason I'm here is because I have had a complete breakdown of my trust in the city government to do what it's supposed to be doing. And the more I learn, the more scared I am because it feels like nobody's in charge. And I blame myself partly for that because during the C2K2 process, I was so burned out by all the red ribbon committees and all the other committees that have been going on for the last 2 decades, as far as I can remember, that by the time C2K2 rolled around, I really thought nothing would happen, and that it wasn't really important to put a lot of input into it. And so I kind of backed off of it, and now I regret that.
My name is Pebble, and I live, I guess you'd say, in the fringes of Harvard Square in West Cambridge, right off Mount Auburn Street. And I've lived there. I've lived in Cambridge most of my adult life. What was the other question? What
sustains you in this work?
My love of Cambridge. I've traveled all over the world, and every time I go away and see a nice city, I'm still happy to come back here, and I realize how special this place is. And what's gotten me involved now is hope, because I've been involved in battles over these same issues for many years in Cambridge, mostly defeated. But I have a sense now with this wide range of support, so many people involved, there is a hope that things could change in this city. And what has been the issue that's been hard to fight is the control by City Hall and the manager of most of the development process. They have dictated, they have demanded that Kendall Square, which is great, it's helped the tax base, it's kept our taxes down, you can't argue with that. Great AAA rating in bonds, but we've suffered. It's cost us in quality of life. And I think this is the turning point where we either take the reins back and say it's going to be in our terms, not the city government, who are captive of the real estate industry, let's face it, they really are. And if we take the reins back and make it our city in our image, with a balance, as you say, with a good balance.
Thank you. Thank you, Pebble.
I lived for 16 years in the Central Square area.
A little bit,
I lived for 16 years in the Central Square area, and 4 months ago I moved to one of the new buildings. They're Fresh Pond, the spaceships. think they're calling them. But I got an inclusionary zoning unit there, so I can afford it. And Central Square to me it just was too noisy where I lived, and I couldn't. The after-hours party I had to move, so we'll see. But what sustains me? Oh, also I wanted to say I'm a longtime affordable housing advocate and I guess activist, but I've been on the board of the Alliance of Cambridge Tenants for 2 sessions, 2 board terms in a row, and now I'm taking one off. So I think what sustains me is not being able to just sit and let things that bother me go by, injustices, and also the friendships and the people I meet. And I've been trying to sort of bring the voice of low-income residents to communities where, that I don't see, that they have too many other voices. And also I work a little bit with young children, and I really love that. That's kind of my joy. So.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Richard Krushnick lived right in Inman Square, 3 houses behind the hardware store.
I know that is.
Across from the deli. I'll say more because I'm up next, after we talk about the big picture of Cambridge and what we're all fighting for, which is basically a diverse city. That's what I'm fighting for, and I think that's what the Cambridge Residents Alliance is fighting for. And it's not just to protect those of us who are here and defend us against the incomers, but it's because that's what the best kind of a city is. It's a very diverse city, and if you don't run into all kinds of people, then your brain isn't going to be in all kinds of people's brain, and you're not going to be able to really contribute to the world in the best way possible. So we have to have diverse cities if we're going to survive in this planet and keep it together. And what keeps me going, I think, the same thing that keeps the rest of you going. It's sort of the fellowship of people who, progressive people who care and are out there doing things.
Great. Thank you, Richard.
My name is Paul Stone. I grew up in the Bronx, and that was a city where the races didn't mix, where socioeconomic groups didn't mix, and it was kind of a hard, concrete world. And most of my life has been a journey away from the Bronx. And coming to Cambridge, I found just what Richard was talking about, a mix that really works, where people seem to honor, people struggling as well as people who have made it. And I'm a writer, so for me, it's part of my calling is to speak truth to power. At times, I really regret it, and I wish it wasn't that way, because it takes me into a number of places that I'm not particularly comfortable. I'm not a confrontational person, but I end up creating conflict and going into it. And what has sustained me, and I have to say, this has been a real uphill slog for the last 2 years. And the last few months, it seems like something has kind of blossomed, and I found that to be incredibly invigorating. Where for a while it seemed like nobody was listening to the message. So I find that very, very satisfying, renewing. And this exercise today is just wonderful that people actually care enough to show up.
Mention your blog. So why don't we start right here with you, Paul? The next question is the reactions to the panels today, which you've already begun to speak about. So why don't you start with that question?
Okay, I'd be happy to. I've been living with what we've been talking about what the panelists have been talking about, and probably too closely, but there's a value when consciousness is brought to any situation. It brings not only light, but it brings energy, and I think that's what's happening here. I feel like this is all energizing situations that we've all been beaten up in the corner, and then suddenly we're together and we're saying we're not going to get beaten up anymore. So I'm feeling very excited about that. Oh, and my blog. I have a CCTV blog, and I also have a regular blog, paulstonesthrow.com.
And how do you access it?
Well, paulstonesthrow.com is the URL. And
PaulStonesThrow.com. He throws stones. He says he's not confrontational. He's throwing
But
stones.
Paul has the stone.
right. You only know, yeah, Paul Stone's. Well, they're both the same. Paul Stone's Throw has a lot more of my personal stuff. I try to keep CCTV now mostly Cambridge oriented.
Is that recorded, what you're saying? Is it filmed?
No film. Oh no, they have their own, their blogs, online blog. Joe, Lori is blogs there.
I got some.
Yes, you do, and you did great work on this. I've seen it.
I don't have it. Tell us about it when you get to you. So reactions to the panels. Thank you, Paul, for taking that question off. Well, I was really impressed with the community, the Cambridge at large community, coming into the same room, talking to each other and sharing both their wins and their losses and their concerns. And I imagine that only good can come of it. When the community really unites around an issue, there is a possibility for change to happen. So it was very, very encouraging and hopeful. I was very happy to be able to be a participant in the sense of witnessing it. So how about you?
I've sort of sniffed at this Cambridge Residents Alliance for a long time, and I think it's very important and it's changed a great deal from 4 or 5 years ago when I first became aware of what this was and began to sort of look at it and what we're doing here today. And so I think the tone of the posts and the tone of our correspondence and our messages within the Area 4 coalition and whatnot, it's changed a great deal, and it's become, I wouldn't say more hopeful, but also it's not so down in the mouth the way it was, or so angry as it was in part some years back. And so something must be happening.
So this is my first time coming to any one of these meetings, either the local meeting or obviously this is the first time that all of the groups have come together, right? Which is the main thing that I'm really just struck by. I think that's pretty amazing and really cool in all of these years. How many years has it been?
Since we're in control.
Right, since when? Wow.
That's what I think.
Yeah. So
last big
yeah, so that's really something. But then also just an appreciation of how complex the issues are. Like nothing here is black and white, and I think it takes I guess wisdom and patience and the spirit that you were noting, that it feels like the group is more open to nuanced discussion, maybe. I think that's what's required, to deal with all of this.
the question is, how do I feel about what was spoken about?
Some of your reactions to the panel.
I was really impressed that I live in Central Square. I'm very neighborhood-centric, so I tend not to really venture out in other parts of Cambridge that often. But I was really impressed with Jan Deborah's presentation about what was going on in North Cambridge. And very good, very Fresh Pond, yeah. And I watched some of her speech to the city council a few weeks ago online, and I don't want to see that happening in Central Square. And I hope we talk details and about exactly what we're going to do in Central Square before we start looking like what her part of the city's looking like. And I hope we get onto it and get it going and talk details about what's going on. Oh, I'm on CCTV as well for a blog, and I'm actually, one of my upcoming stories, or probably it'd be my next story, is a C2K2 analysis, which a lot of people are either for or against the C2K2, but they really haven't read through it themselves. I mean, for most people that are here, we have probably read it, but for a lot of people in the neighborhood, they just simply haven't read it word for word. So I'm just going to go through it and do maybe a multi-part story talking about different. Well, it's a CCTV neighbor media program. You just go into neighbor media.
Neighbor media?
Yeah, on CCTV, Cambridge.org.
You don't have to do a name to get through.
Oh, well, my name is Lori.
Oh, you search your name?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Lori did a great piece on Central Square, the physical setup of transportation,
Thank you.
bicycling. No, I was very impressed with her.
Thank you.
Are you a reporter by training?
No. Interior design. Completely different.
Oh, haven't I done this?
Reaction to the panel. What was your reaction to the panel? Some of your reactions.
I think it was excellent. I personally got a little frustrated because I know too much, and I kept wishing there was more time for people to expound on their issue. But hopefully there'll be a follow-up, and people will write questions and address the panelists and get answers, because I think that's the most important thing: is how you did this and how this group did that, what the results have been.
Thank you.
Some of the planning, so I knew a lot of what was going on, but it was really great to hear everyone so succinctly putting all the issues on the table. I guess I'm feeling a little uncomfortable, maybe self-conscious, because I live in one of the new buildings, and to have people say really things that are not great about where I live. I mean, I have to live there. I don't have a choice to just move. If you're low income in Cambridge, you don't have many choices. I mean, I was lucky to get this place. So, I mean, I agree with a lot of what they're saying, and I've been a long time foe of this kind of development that's mostly luxury and high towers. And I mean, I started in Central Square and all this. So I'm at a weird place where I agree with it, yet I'm grateful to have my apartment, and I enjoy where I'm living right now, except for the horrible industrial air conditioning sound from an already existing building.
Which one are you in?
I'm in 80 Fawcett Street.
Oh, 80 Fawcett?
Yeah.
It's a brand new one.
Yeah, but I really like it. Where I was before, I loved the people, but it was just too noisy all the time. In this place, I can at least close my windows, and it's for right now. It's quiet, and I'm happy. I like exploring a new area.
Well, Kathy, I think you're speaking to really the complexity of the issue. It isn't simple. Thank you for sharing.
I think I'll pass. I mean, I've been in every one of these meetings. One of the panelists or listening to the panels. I've heard it all so many times.
Yeah.
I don't think my opinion matters at this
Okay, let's quickly go around the call again. So the question is, what's important to you in creating the Cambridge that you value? And Kathy's going to take notes on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just wanted to know the question.
Well, that's great.
Write any name.
Let's keep going. What's important to you in creating the Cambridge that you value?
I think there needs to be sort of a deliberate approach to this. I think that what's been happening now has been it's almost like flash freezing. It's just been sort of an overnight thing, and nobody is caring about the consequences. So I'm not against change, I'm not against development, but I am against wholesale change and wholesale development. And I think the things that I'm most concerned about are the things that we all value.
So I want to
Diversity.
thank people.
The ability to live 2 blocks away from somebody that's
Just so
being
we
helped. I
can
like to have somebody being helped, and I like to be close to those people.
I've been asked to do that musically.
Oh, so let
So
me
if you
finish
will
here.
join me.
Thank you
Happy
very much.
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nancy. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you for sharing the service.
That's what a lot of people have asked me. So what are you doing on your birthday? But actually, the best, when I was asked at our table, with, what do I value the most about Cambridge? I value community. So here we are for my birthday. What could be better? I want to remind anyone who doesn't have one of these registration cards, this is the way we'll stay in touch with you. So if anyone hasn't filled one out, I'm going to put them up here on this, I'll put them, come find them. But make sure that you fill it out or we won't know who you are. The second thing is, you have a poll on your table, and we'd really like you to fill that out as well. It asks questions that, some of which you might not have been sure of your answers before the panels, and perhaps the panels helped you think about your answers. So if anyone doesn't have them, we have plenty, these goldenrod colored. I think I'll just ask this question in behalf of Kathy and Nancy, who designed this table structure. Can I just see a show of hands? How many people found this to be something that created value in this meeting? That's great to hear. And it's fine if you don't, because we're all in this together. But that's good information for us, because it helps us to think more about how to build community while we're building knowledge about our community. So now it's my opportunity to welcome my co-chair of the Cambridge Residents Alliance, Jonathan King, and Richard Kreshnick, to talk a little bit about where we're heading, and then we're going to have other short panels. You've seen that our day goes quickly and we're keeping to time, so you will be out of here at 6:30 in time for more River Festival and a beautiful evening. So thank you for sticking with the process.
So in the neighborhood presentations, we've heard a lot about changes that are happening pretty fast. All these real estate developments that are popping up all over the place and are getting greased right through the planning board, and they're all happening one at a time without any discussion, reflection, information, feedback about what's going on everywhere else in the city and how what happens here impacts what happens there and how it all adds up and all that. And I'd like to just briefly add a little bit of background to this fast pace of change that we're sort of being overwhelmed by right now. And that's just referencing this statistical analysis of Cambridge that the Community Development Department did that is lovely. They had all this census information from 1950 through 2010, 60 years. And you can just look at it and see the transformation of the city of Cambridge. Decade past decade, children disappearing, families disappearing. We now have less than half the percentage of the people in the city are in families than was the case in 1950. The proportion of the city's population that are children up to 18 years of age is half what it was 64 years ago. The 20 to 40-year-olds are taking over the city. They're now about 35.5% of the population. And the disappearance of children and families and the mushrooming of the 20 to 40-year-olds is not, it's accelerating. It's happening even faster now than it was before. Also, we saw the when Cambridge stopped being a light manufacturing and a labor-intensive services city, we saw the working class start to get pushed out of the city. The blue-collar part of the city disappeared largely from 1950 through 1970. And since then, now it's mainly what you might call, I guess, the middle class that's being pushed out of the city. That's the segment of the population that is decreasing most rapidly now. And the incoming younger people are higher paid. They're the highest paid. We've seen the even accounting for inflation, adjusting into constant dollars and all that, we've almost witnessed a quadrupling of the average family income in this 64-year period. So the transition is happening very fast. Are you giving me 3 minutes? Is that what you're giving me? 4? Thank you. Okay. And I've already used 3? That's hopeless. So anyway, all these areas that we've been talking about, plus North Point, are where the development is focused. It's concentrated, right? It's less than half the city, but it's where most of the big action is taking place. And if you forget about the rest of the city, just look at those parts of the city. The city, in all these studies that have been done from Alewife through C2K2 and all that, they're talking about an increase in the total built space in the city of about a third. If you can imagine, a third more of buildings in the city. And that was supposed to happen between 2010 and somewhere around 2030, 2035. Tremendous increase in building in the city, both commercial and residential. This is what all the powers that be are anticipating. And 40% of it is already happening. Just in the first part of this 25-year period. Just what's already been built is in construction, has been permitted or is in the permitting process is 40% of this build-out that supposedly was going to take until 2030 or 2035. So time is of the essence. We have really got to stick together and gain some control over the city that we want. Whatever that is, we have to come together and we have to state our vision of the kind of a community we want. We have to understand how high buildings and high density are going to affect that, and we're going to have to do whatever needs to be done to address those issues. And we're also going to manage to keep transportation functioning in the meantime somehow.
What did I do with my glasses? Doesn't
I haven't started yet.
On the table? Is that them?
Yes. All right, good afternoon. Richard has referred to this enormous buildup. It's millions of square feet of new and proposed construction. And that translates into tens of thousands of new employees and residents traveling into and out of the city or traveling across the city. Now, many of these may travel by bicycle or walk or skateboard, but given the high prices of the new residences and the high-tech character of the employment, a majority will own cars. Some, for example, living in Fresh Pond, Alewife, may use the T to go to work, but the spouse or the roommate, they'll drive out to an office on Route 28, or they'll use their car to drive their daughter to East Cambridge for a soccer game or to Sierra Les. So this dramatic increase in population density will translate into tens of thousands of additional car trips, tens of thousands of additional transit trips a day. You already know that the current traffic is like, and this increase is going to saturate, is going to burden the auto transit and burden the public transit in a way that's going to degrade the quality of life for everybody in Cambridge. Now, some years back, just to give a little personal anecdote for what brought me in this, some years back I worked in Kendall Square, I lived in Central Square, go back and forth. Some years back I was attending one of the Kendall Square Planning Committee meetings. The presenter put up a slide that estimated 30,000 additional car trips a day, 30,000 additional T trips a day, generated by the thousands of new employees just into Kendall Square. They then showed a slide showing that there was going to be no problem, no traffic problems in Kendall Square, except maybe at Broadway and 3rd Street. The next night, Jackie and I and many other Area 4 residents went to the Central Square Committee, the C2 committee meeting that Paul has talked about. The very same person who had presented at Kendall Square then made a presentation at Central Square. No traffic problem in Central Square. No mention of the 30,000 car trips in Kendall Square, many of which would go up and down Main Street, up and down Broadway, up and down Prospect Street, out over the BU Bridge, out Route 2, right? They're not just localized. So many of us concerned over this deep misrepresentation, polite way to put it. So the Cambridge Residents Alliance engaged Steve Kaiser, a trained traffic engineer, to carry out an independent analysis, which he did. Now there's the map that Goody Clancy put up in the city, and it shows the intersections in Kendall Square, and there's no problem with any of them except the yellow one at Broadway and 3rd Street. Here's Steve's map, the next slide. He simply extended the analysis to include the BU Bridge and Alowife Brook and Union Square. And you see they're all red now, right? Without the 60 or 70,000 additional car trips a day. Already, these are heavily congested and they're failing in intersections. Next slide. Now, not being able to get around, you know, it sounds like it's a small thing. Increased difficulty for everybody trying to get to and from work, reduced staff and business efficiency for companies, universities, and hospitals, daily task problems for people who have kids, have to get into school, get them to after-school programs, get them to soccer games, it's murder. And then, of course, the increased health burden from idling cars and air pollution. Now, it's very complicated. The Alowife Route 2 situation is a nightmare. We're not going to address it here. In the fall, we'll deal with it, much more seriously. Let me move on to the red line, the T. That's a much simpler situation, right? We are blessed with this excellent public transit system. I want to remind you that the red line service is not just Cambridge. It goes down into Boston and the other way. People get on all the other stations. It's not just the additional construction in Cambridge that's going to burden the red line. All over the red line passage are proposals to build more, transit-oriented development. Next slide. Those are projections for growth. The system handles about 1.3 million riders a day. A worst case scenario, but it's not really a worst case scenario, it goes up to 1.7 million. That doesn't even count the buildup in Cambridge and Fresh Pond. That's from the area group. So can the red line handle that? Here's a report. Transit congestion is a serious problem on the MBTA. This is from 2010. And that they don't think that the current red line can handle the kind of increased density that's proposed for it. In fact, the T keeps very good statistics. They have a phrase they call crush hour. The Cambridge Residents Alliance was criticized for holding a forum called Crush Hour in Cambridge. That's the technical term for the MBTA of the current situation. Crush capacity means all the seats are taken and everybody standing at one person per 1.5 cubic foot crushed in. We are told that what smart growth is build, baby, build, and Nobody will need cars because they'll all get back and forth to work on the red line. This is not smart growth. This is insane, right? The only smart way to proceed is that, just to go back, the only smart way to proceed is we all support investment in the red line. We need new cars, we need new signals, we need new power supplies. It's billions of dollars of investment. Everybody's for it, but the federal government is out of that business. We compete. We compete with all the other needs of the state. And the way this should proceed is first gather the investment in the red line, get the contracts, and then we can look to see what can be built under the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We don't have time for questions on that panel because they had so much information to put forward, but we will be having a forum on traffic and transit in the fall again to update it, so you'll have more time to talk about that. The next panel is Pebble, Gifford, and myself. And we're going to be talking about planning in Cambridge. So we'll also have a critique we're going to be talking about the planning board right now. We'll have a critique of the Board of Zoning Appeal in the future, which we'll share with you. The planning board in Cambridge reviews all major projects that need some form of relief from the Cambridge zoning ordinance. We want to alert you to some of the problems we see and some solutions we've offered to the city manager and the community development department, which staffs and support the planning board in its work. Many of us from our various neighborhoods have gotten to know each other at the planning board meetings. That's our meeting spot these days. And come away with very similar concerns. It's been an exciting way to get to know people, but it's an awfully long and frustrating process. So 2 weeks ago, a group of us met with the city manager and his senior advisors and await his report on how some of these issues can be addressed, but here they are briefly. The membership. Full membership of the Cambridge Planning Board is 9 members. 7 are full members, and 2 are associates who fill in when a member can't be present. Currently, there are 8 members and 1 vacancy. 5 people have expired terms. Only 3 are currently members in good standing. The city leadership has not been paying attention to the legal requirements pertaining to this powerful board. The actions of this planning board with so many expired terms could be questioned legally in court. The process for recruiting, interviewing, accepting, or rejecting candidates is not specified in any public document. Some applicants we know have either been ignored or interviewed and not notified of the results and never appointed. The city manager promises a new and public process. We're waiting for that report. It's not overdue, so that's not a criticism in that way. He said he'd have it for us in 3 to 4 weeks. We met with him about 3 weeks ago. The current chair, Hugh Adams-Russell, has been a member of the board for over 25 years and is in his 4th two-year term as chair. His board term has expired. We have gotten recommendation from people who really know this that the chair should rotate among its members because the chair really sets the tone, both the atmospheric tone and the practical tone of how each proposal is looked at. So why should we care? We should care because we'd like a legally constituted board, but in the absence of any master plan for the city, the planning board grants special permits that give relief from the zoning ordinance requirements, small and large, to proposals on a one-by-one basis. So you saw some of that in the critique offered by the Fresh Pond Residents Alliance. And then what you get is a hodgepodge and an incredibly overcrowded, badly designed area that doesn't even constitute a neighborhood. The criteria for a special permit are interpreted very narrowly from the experience of many residents, and sometimes criteria seem to be ignored. For instance, take the Fresh Pond area. One criterion for denying a special permit states, quote, traffic generated or patterns of access or egress would cause congestion, hazard, or substantial change in established neighborhood character. Did you see any of that in the slides you saw with Fresh Pond? I think I did. That wasn't important to the planning board. In one hearing, the chair stated that he had developed a memo citing the specific criteria the board would utilize and forbade public testimony on any but those criteria. However, the memo was not available to the public. That was recently a hearing on New Street. The resident experience. Developers are given unlimited time to present their case, with lawyers, architects, and other specialists speaking and answering questions. Residents are given 2 to 3 minutes at the discretion of the chair. We saw this at the courthouse hearing right here in this room, where they had probably, I think it was 90 minutes of testimony from the developer and a huge trail of specialists. All documents are supposed to be in writing, submitted in advance, and available to the public. They are often not posted on the city's website before a hearing, so residents have to scramble to absorb any changes made to a project since a prior hearing and adjust our testimony. There are many more details. The goal of this panel is to alert you to one aspect of how our city needs to improve and change some of its most fundamental practices to offer rational and responsible planning processes that inspire the trust of the residents. So Pebble, my companion here, is a legendary founder and activist in the Harvard Square Defense Fund who's been up against the planning board many more years than I. For me, this is a relatively recent experience, so I thought we'd hear a few words from Pebble.
Hello, everybody. Quick question. How many of you had the experience of testifying in front of the planning board? So you know what Nancy's talking about. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what I see is the history of the development process in Cambridge for the past, what was the turning point for development? Maybe with the Kendall Square and the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority, but let's say 30 some odd years. It's been very one-sided. There's no getting around that fact. The city administration has been very pro the real estate interests, and this is shown over the years in their appointments to boards like the planning board, like the Board of Zoning Appeal. It shows in the election of city councilors where their interests lie. And for an inside peek at what goes on there, I refer you to the new site that lists campaign contributions. And that is the Office of Finance.
Campaign and Political Finance.
What's the acronym?
OCPF.
OCPF. If you look at that, you'll see who gives what to whom, and it's very, very revealing of who were the beneficiaries of the real estate interest. The maximum contribution you can give to a city councilor is $500. And indeed, the real estate interests give that amount in great numbers. That tells a story. Now, problem is that this isn't all bad, this increase in development and increase in, because it's increased the tax base, which has in turn increased the financial status of the city, which is very sound. We're AAA bond rated. We have lower taxes, property taxes because of it. And it finances a lot of the things we want as Cambridge citizens. We have renovated schools, we have a new library, we have sewer separation. I'm not sure everybody's crazy about that. We have well-paid city employees, and Kendall Square, I think to date, has been the engine for that. But it's continuing now in other areas of the city, and I think our previous city manager saw Central Square as another engine. He saw these high-rise new buildings in Central Square as a possible new engine. And Alewife is certainly being looked at as a new engine, and Discovery Park. So the unfortunate thing is that this is not trickled down, all this development, to low-income people in the city. And this is unfortunate, but that's another story, and I think we're going to have we had something on that? I see this now as a chance. We have a chance now to take back our city from the real estate interests. really think that's essential. We have to have more balanced boards, as Nancy mentioned, and the attitude at the Cambridge Community Development Department has to change too, because they were the ones that drafted the zoning that we're now living with in Alewife and other parts of this, in Concord. And I have the booklet here. If any of you want it, you can go down and get it from the Community Development Department. But it just takes your breath away, because it's just more and more and more of the same. So the other thing we have to do is think of our city councils. Which among them will maintain this balance of interest? We have to get out and support councilors who will do that, who aren't just captive of the real estate interest. And if you look at that campaign finance site that I told you about, you'll see who are and why they are. So I see this as sort of a philosophical question. It comes down to quality of life in Cambridge. And maybe we have to pay a bit more for the quality of life we want. Right now, we are suffering from the consequences of having a healthy, financially sound city. But it's costing us. And I think as individuals, we have to examine what it is that's important to us and decide where we want this money to go and where we want it to come from. If it's all going to come from future development tax base, then we're going to be stuck with the views of those interests, and they'll have the last word. But if we're willing to temper that a little bit and look at the quality of life issues and say, well, maybe we should sacrifice a little development here in exchange for more open space. I'm very anxious to do an open space analysis of Cambridge. I don't think one has really been done, and I'm looking forward to doing that, because I think we are on the short end of the stick when it comes to open space per capita. And I will be working on that and let you all know. There's no reason we should be. So, in other words, it's up to you folks what kind of a city you want. Thank you.
Yeah.